Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Certified Forgotten. We are nominally, under normal circumstances, a 1 hour podcast that talks to an awesome guest about a new or newish movie, something from the last 10 years or so, with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. But every other week, we do what we call Uncertified, which means it's me versus Matt Donato on something that just hit theaters that we're excited to hopefully agree on, and in some cases disagree on. And in this fucking case, straight up go to war on, I think, which I have been looking forward to ever since this was announced. I knew this was going to be something that Donato and I were going to battle over.
Listen, it's never versus. It's always in good faith. I think we just have very different tastes, and I just want to make sure people know this is not one of those podcasts that is intentionally trying to fight each other versus
Mhm.
we just have organically different horror movie tastes in general. So that's going to lead to disagreements, but it's all in good faith. It's all in love. This is what I like doing. I like, having conversations about movies that I don't agree with somebody on because you can still have a positive conversation about something that you don't maybe like see the perspective of the other person. I think it's healthy. It's good. So I just want to make sure it's like, we're getting a little bit away of that old school blogger mentality of me against the world, everyone else is dumbasses versus Monogle's
Mm.
just like kind of wrong. It's not fully wrong. He's just kind of wrong.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of right, and we'll kind of go from there, is what I'll say. But yes, for longtime listeners, you already know that Osgood Perkins is a point of contention between myself and Mr. Matthew. We have argued vehemently, however you pronounce it, over the years about the quality of his films. We are on quite a little hot streak. We both liked Long Legs to varying degrees. We both liked The Monkey to varying degrees as well. So we've had two movies to sort of get on the same page about his features, and then he released Keeper. And neither of us have, we both made a point of not reading each other's reviews. So I know that Donato doesn't like Keeper. He knows that I did like Keeper, and everything else is going to be fresh in terms of our conversation today. But before we get started, if you haven't seen it, it's in theaters right now. If you're not like me and have already pre-ordered the vinyl soundtrack from neon.rated.com, let me give you a little grounding in a quick synopsis about the film. After a bad run of relationships, Liz is looking forward to celebrating her 1 year anniversary with Malcolm away from the big city. Only letting down your guard is harder than it looks. At first, Liz chalks up her discomfort to little things: the creaks the roof makes as it settles at night, or the way voices carry through the vents across the building. But things begin to escalate. Liz is frightened by Malcolm's creepy cousin Darren, and the food left out by the caretaker causes Liz to begin hallucinating strange people on the property. Before the weekend is over, Liz will find out for herself how well she really knows this man. Written by Nick Leppard, Keeper is the second of Osgood Perkins's two horror films in 2025. Donato, tell me why you're wrong about Keeper.
So I think prefacing this with my spectrum of Oz Perkins is the lowest end to me is I am the pretty thing that lives in the house.
Correct.
And I really do think after weighing Long Legs against The Monkey, The Monkey is my favorite Oz Perkins movie. And if you know my taste in horror in general, leaning towards the more brutal, comedic, dark humor, all that stuff, it makes sense that The Monkey would be there. And I say that because I think it makes sense that I was really lukewarm to negative on Keeper because I do want to honestly admit that I was rolling with Keeper's punches for a while. This
Mm.
wasn't an immediate, I don't know. I'm the Pretty Things is just like swallowing sandpaper. It is the driest shit I have ever fucking had to indulge as a horror fan. And it's everything that I don't vibe with in tonality, pacing, all that stuff. And I do think Perkins leans a little bit back into that territory here in Keeper, but for what he was doing between the relationship dynamic between two people, this idea that you are still getting to know someone romantically and both as a person in general, and how you try to give over to the idea of romance and all these things that put two people in a house in the middle of woods that you just described, and how that spirals out of control. I think that's the way I described it in my review is it very much feels like the movie Fresh meets the movie Men, in the way that it handles both relationship arcs and then the gender battle that happens between them. Like, this is a man versus woman, struggle going through patriarchy and all these other things. It is dealing with all of that. And then the folkloric on top of it. So there's a
Mhm.
lot going on. And I use men specifically because I also don't like men. And I think it's a messy telling of the folkloric horror that it goes with. So for so long, I think the performances are really fucking good, if I'm being honest. Tatiana Maslany carrying this thing the whole way as this distraught woman who is also trying to like solve a mystery at the same time as survive herself. And Rossi Sutherland is doing really good as the nice guy. Like, he's doing exactly what he has to. He's the one you don't assume things of, but you do immediately because it's too overt.
Yep.
And I like how the film never hid that there was danger. From the very first scene, you know that Tatiana's Liz is in danger, and you know that we don't trust Malcolm. It's just what it is. It's
Right.
setting it up perfectly. And then that third act happens, and I am so frustrated because while the entire third act lost me, it has such really strong horror imagery, and it absolutely is like swinging full force in a way that I do respect. Like Oz goes for it. There is some Mike Flanagan esque like Hill House imagery here that is akin to the bent neck woman and stuff like that. Like the images that you just think about later, and these gruesome, horrific, just well, I'll say ghouls. I'm going to leave it there without going
Yeah.
deeper yet. So while I like parts of this movie, and I really do think what's contained in the third act does make for a memorable kind of impact, the storytelling just absolutely falls apart. And where it gets me the most is the more we learn or don't learn about the happenings on in this house and that specific area, the more I question the entire film. Like, Oz Perkins basically brings his storytelling into question for the entirety of what I've just seen. So I'm no longer with the ride and moving forward. I'm now going, well, wait, hold on, what the fuck? Like, you've just said this, but you did this, and the rules just get so muddled.
Whew. Okay. Couple of things. And I am playing up the humor of our disagreement. I want to anchor all of this in the fact that what I'm going to talk about is how I view films, how I watch films, which is very different than how you do it. So there's I had a long running argument with a friend of mine in college about the fact that I don't believe I he believed that there was music that was subjective. There were good bands, there were bad bands. I've always been, or sorry, he believed there was music that was objective. There were good bands, there were bad bands. I've always been, there's no such thing as good. Good is a social construct, and I believe that. All that prefacing aside, one of the things I have read other reviews, even though I haven't read yours, one of the things that comes up a lot with Keeper is the thing that you just hit on, that idea of sort of intellectual consistency, and that the film doesn't it doesn't define its rules, it breaks its rules, etc. And I think one of the big realizations for me in talking about Keeper is that's just not how I view movies. I look for emotional honesty or emotional cohesion. I don't look for logical or intellectual cohesion, which isn't to say that's better or worse. It's just like those things that you talk about in the third act are definitely there. There are things about, what is the connection to the ghosts and what are the creatures and blah blah blah. And I think there are a lot of people that are much better writers than me. I've read the reviews and they take the movie, rake it over the coals for the things it gets wrong about that. But I think that, the most controversial thing that I'll say about this film, which will get me yelled at by probably a certain segment of film critics, is I watched Keeper and it was just an accident on the same weekend. And I found them to be kind of birds of a feather. Like, it was just an accident is an Iranian film about a group of people that stumble across who they think was their tormentor under a previous regime, and they believe that there is, they believe they found this person who was abusive to them, and they have an opportunity to right the wrongs, and et cetera, et cetera. And they're both films. It was just an accident, and Keeper are both films about people that are trying to and perhaps failing to overcome their own bad experiences and their own instincts. I think the biggest piece of Keeper for me is it's a story about somebody that can't trust themselves anymore. They've had a string of bad relationships where they were basically, in relationships or trying to date people that were literally unavailable, were married is one of the running jokes of the film. And so this character is not able to understand or feels like they can't trust themselves if things are red flags, if things are green flags of how they're connected to Malcolm, which is the character that Sutherland plays. A big chunk of that first half of the movie is about somebody who is in an environment they're not comfortable in. They're a city pigeon and they're out in the countryside. And Muslaney is very good at demonstrating how discomforted Liz is by everything about nature and water and the outdoors. But it's also trying to say, is this something that I'm overlooking because I'm happy? Is it something that I'm overlooking because I've evolved and grown up in a relationship? And so much about Keeper, when you view it through the lens of this person that is battling their own instincts in relationships, and that is opening the door in a big way to really bad and nefarious things that are happening through a very honest attempt to like get over themselves. It's a powerful little character study, and I really resonated with that for pretty much the whole film. It's what made it such a good and powerful horror movie for me.
And that is the stuff I like about it. I think we've talked enough about, anti rom com horror, these horror movies that take otherwise, comedic lifetime scenarios with, oh no, they're gonna go spend a week together and get into quirky circumstances and find love at the end of it. Like, no, like Keeper is very much I use Fresh as a comparison point, like with purpose. It's very much hurtling towards disaster, and there is fun conversational stuff here with Tatiana's character Liz, and she has her best friend at home, or quote unquote best friend. They kind of quarrel throughout the
Yeah.
movie, which is it's one of those relationships. But to your point, she keeps bringing up, oh, is when is this guy gonna say he has a wife or something like that? And her, what we get out of those conversations, and also what we get later from Liz's actions, is her pressing against maternal instincts as well and things of that nature, and the relationship that's fun versus the relationship that's more homely and maybe socially acceptable, whatever we want to talk about. So I think Oz Perkins he's going in the right direction with all that stuff, because what happens later is very much rooted in that. It's rooted in the motherhood that maybe someone is trying to fight against, the instincts you talk about that she doesn't want to kind of give credence to, but also has to accept, quote unquote, like everything that's wrestling, like, or that she's wrestling inside. It's a lot. It's good. There's thematic like heft here, and I think that comes out at points, and I think that's all really based on Tatiana's performance. But then just when you get to the end, though, I feel like it's such a I get it's a vibes movie, and I get Oz is always a vibes director, and maybe that is why I struggle with him so much more than like, and you're so like attracted to his work.
Mhm.
But I go back to the slow burn kind of aesthetic that A24 has made popular over the years, and kind of like spearheaded with things like Saint Maud, and that's a movie I bring up often to explain my relationship with a slow burn. And I know people love Saint Maud, but to me it's more of a build up, build up, build up for 2 seconds worth of the payoff, and then we're done. And I kind of feel like that's Keeper a little bit here, and I feel like that's where I struggle with Oz making a movie with that final shot in his head and going, how do we get there? Like, that's how I read more of Keeper. It's for this, again, fantastic final shot of somebody taking back their life in a way they never thought they would, and the person that pays the consequence. We talk spoilers here on the podcast and whatnot, so we're going to get probably a little deeper into that. But how everything comes together, the glue that gets us, or sorry, that pieces the film together and contextually carries us from scene to scene, it just, like, it evaporates as the film goes on, and it goes back to my comment before about saying I love so much about the creature effects and the designs here and the horror imagery that he is achieving. But when you are so ambiguous, even nebulous here, I think there's ambiguity, and then there's just leaving people to their own devices ideologically. And while it's quite obvious the fight taking place and the stance being taken, you betray a little bit of the storytelling that you use to get there. And that's where I get more stuck on it, where I'm trying to address the film and roll with it, because I do have my vibes movies as well. I think Climax right there, like, I'll watch Climax any day of the week. I fucking love it. I, Keeper is one of those where it's just out of reach for me. It kind of the
Mm.
third act, I'm like grasping at it and I'm going, I want to be here. I want to be with you. I'm so into what you've been doing, but give me a reason to stay. And it just kept being out of reach. And that's just kind of like, yeah, flew away.
One of the things that I think is important with regards to Keeper is, you know, Miscellany or Mislani. I'm gonna continue to say Miscellany because that's what's stuck in my head, but I could be wrong. Um, I think it's very important to this film and this story that she's in her 40s, both the actress and the character. And part of the reason for that, and kind of a surprise that I have to hear that you, when we talked about this previously, that both you and Perry were soft on it, is I feel like it's such a New York City coded film. Like I have so many friends, and even in my own experiences in New York, right? The idea of, if you are 40 and thinking, I don't know if I want to settle down, I don't know if I want a family. And I don't believe the keeper hits the maternal instincts particularly hard. I think it's sort of thrust on her, but I don't think that's something she's grappling with. And we can disagree about that. But it's very much a film about characters that are, making decisions that people maybe in the Midwest or on the West Coast would associate as like early 30s decisions in their 40s, and kind of the accelerated time frame that puts you on a little bit about like, I met someone, how many opportunities do I have? I have a dear friend of mine who is in her early 40s and is in one of her first kind of like, long-term loving committed relationships, and she's said that, we're just kind of doing everything at double speed, at two times, because, we're making up for lost time a little bit. That is true, I think, of Liz, the fact that she is sort of exploring and celebrating being in what seems to be a committed, mutual relationship with somebody who is available for the first time in a long time. It colors the way that she explores the, being a city person and what is dangerous or what is threatening about the environment that she's in. I know a lot of people that are frustrated or voiced frustration at the fact that like the movie keeps doing cutaways of the roof, and they're like, look at the inside of the roof, and like, oh, is this scary? But I just moved into a new place. I'm trying to adjust to all of the different noises that the house makes, and that stuff does get under your skin, especially if you're used to being in a more urban environment. So I think you're absolutely right about it being vibes, but I think there's so much of this city to countryside piece that's coded into it, that this 40 something piece that's coded into it, it's specific. This character is specific in a way that I strongly related to, that I felt like I understood. But I do think that that's kind of the weird duality of Keeper, is the idea that this is a very specific character at a very specific point in their life with a very specific set of experiences that they're pushing through, and then that character's journey is unfolding in vibes. And man, if you fucking line up with that, you're going to have a really good time. But if you're off on either of those, if you don't connect with the vibes or you can't relate to the character, there isn't a lot else there. I think that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, and like that is you're teeing up something that speaking about like me and Perry and stuff like that. I think it's also LA coded too. It's not
Mm,
a specifically New York thing. I think it is a metropolitan city thing. I think it is a whether I was in New York City or Los Angeles, there is not that haste to get into a familial relationship and the things that all of my friends did moving back home, and that's not judgment, it's just different people on different
yeah,
tracks.
very much so.
And like I got that. Oh no, trust me. Like I was, even me, 36, I'll be 37 in April and still single. It's still all there. Like those comments do hit hard. And I bring up the motherhood because I think actually like that's what a lot of the third act is getting at though, because it's this idea that she takes over and is mother to these creatures, like the where this is going. And I hope you've seen the film if you're listening to this already, or you don't mind somewhat spoilers here, but I think that's where the problem lies though. And maybe not problem, because I feel like Oz wanted everyone to take what they need from this movie. And your read being not as strong on the motherhood instincts versus my read being like, oh yeah, it's literally about fighting that fighting an instinct that you don't have, or even like fighting society's instinct, because she is fighting this whole time. Like Liz is fighting against everything that is being forced upon her, and the idea of it feeling natural versus being a facade for something else, and the trusting, all that stuff.
Hmm.
It's such a Bleak might be a little too far, but it is a very poignant addressing of how scary it is to get into a comfortable relationship, and especially like nowadays, the facade is just stronger than ever. I mean, anyone who's suffered through online dating knows how fucking hard it is just to break through to anyone real and get any kind of like real conversation. And to have that kind of fall apart at the goal line, there's nothing more heartbreaking. And so like there is that in inside keeper. But I go back to that third act once again and what I just said and how we have such different reads on where it's going. And there just needed to be something stronger there, because as the creatures make themselves more known, and these elements of witchcraft and these elements of things in the woods and very centuries spanning storylines that start to unravel, it either needed to be more or less. It's, in my opinion, obviously, but it needed to either go harder into the lore and build that up as something needy, or give us less somehow.
Mm,
Just use them as ghouls, and use them as these entities in the woods where it's almost like Perkins gives us enough to keep us on the hook, but it's not enough to keep us engaged with it. It's he's making us ask questions in a way that's more distraction than entertainment. And when that takes over for me, it's hard to break out of it unless you fulfill certain, I guess, ideas, and I will call them, and what he's playing with, because it's most of these movies. I mean, Black Hood's daughter, we know where the story's going, but he likes to play ambiguous, in certain areas. It's cut and dry, don't get me wrong.
yeah, for those watching it or listening at home,
Yeah.
when Donato mentioned Black Coat's daughter, you didn't see me involuntarily squint at him as I'm waiting for the point that he's about to make.
No, I was just in all his films though. He likes to hold things over our heads, but never really deliver. He's great at the buildup, not so good at the payoff. And that has been my struggle with Oz through Black Coat's Daughter, I Am the Pretty Thing, Gretel and Hansel. Like, all of those movies have tremendous set dressings. They have really good sense of style and really good sense of delivery at certain points. Like Oz Perkins is an artistic filmmaker with his own distinct identity, and that's so hard to come by. It's just unfortunate that I don't think that distinct identity translates into completely rewarding experiences towards the back end.
I'll say two things. One is talking about contemporary experiences and media and social media. The best corollary to this film that I think that I've seen in pop culture, as weird as it's going to sound, is there's a TikTok trend that people do where they're like, they're like when you realize that the person next to you is just somebody you met at a bar one night, and then you have like two kids and like a dog, and you're driving around in like your four wheeler. That like disassociative horror of being like, wait, this is just some person. Why do I have a whole life built around them? I think that that is a sentiment that is very well reflected in Keeper. Is that moment of disassociation when you're like, oh my god, like I've made a lot of decisions with this, and what do I really know about this person? But I think that part of what, and I'm glad you mentioned Gretel and Hansel, because I actually think of all his films, Gretel and Hansel might be a better parallel to Keeper than most, because it's got the architectural nightmare, triangular house in the woods type of vibe. It has a central, really strong performance. Definitely a little bit of the mood or the vibes piece around the margins. But I think the reason, if I had to sum it up in maybe like a single idea, the reason that I respond so much to Osgood Perkins is because I don't think there's any filmmaker working today that can so thoroughly capture the feeling that something is just wrong. Like Osgood Perkins makes films where his characters and his audience know that something's off, and they can't, it's not an easy thing. They can't like open a closet door and there's a monster there and be like, there it is. There isn't always backstory to be able to fill in those blanks. He just thrusts you into these situations where you as the audience and are sitting alongside the character, and you can just feel that something's not right, but then nothing is necessarily happening to validate that. So you're sort of like, am I being, is this innocent? Am I being nervous for no reason? And you live in that space. and how it pays off in the end and whether or not it pays off. Like I kind of don't care. The ending of Keeper is was my least favorite part of it. The creature design is incredibly cool, but whether, to me, the way that I kind of thought about it is this character in the story that I really like that just happened to end up in this other thing, and there are parallels between womanhood years ago and 200 years ago and womanhood today. I don't think that it is a moralistic film. I don't think that it is intending to put its thumb on the scale and say, here is our opinions about motherhood. I think these things just line up a little bit. But what I like about this, what I like about the Black Coat's daughter, what I like about Longlegs is characters that just feel like something's wrong. And it takes them 90 minutes to find out if they're right or not. And I mean, that's anxiety, right? That's the feeling that something's going on that you can't put a shape to. So I certainly there's a reason why I love it there. But yeah, after the film, I about halfway through the movie, because we talked about this before. Like I feel like watching movies is like a Geiger counter. You can just like know it's wildly swinging back and forth. You're trying to be like, is it going to land? Is it not going to land? Is it a 4 star? It's a 5 star. I didn't like that scene. It's down to a 3 star, right? Like it's this thing that shifts as the movie's unfolding. It kind of reached a terminal mass point where I was like, oh, I know that I like this movie now. And part of that is just I can't think of another filmmaker who creates a scenario where stuff just feels off, and I just got to sit there and I got to sit with that, and there's not a let up or progression. And that's not a feeling for everybody, but I love being uncomfortable with Osgood Perkins. I really really do.
And I think the cake scene early on in Keeper is a great example of that. It's he's able to well, he and the actors, both
Hmm.
Sutherland and Maslany, they are just in this really simple engaging of wits because there is nothing but a chocolate cake, a weirdly packaged, very blank chocolate cake that Liz spots immediately as something of obscurity, but it's a chocolate cake at the end of the day. What how bad can that be? So the back and forth that they go through in Malcolm trying to get her to eat the cake and her being hesitant, but then ultimately going forward and just having a bite or two and going down with the piece. It is a really delicate dance between
Yes,
just how uncomfortable everything feels. And that is when Perkins, I agree, is at his best. And that's earlier in the film. And that goes back to kind of what I was saying, where I think he's great at establishing motive and he's great at establishing dread, and whether or not that goes along at a brisk pace, it is eerie the whole time. He kind of keeps you in this suspended state of just discomfort that you're right, other people can't achieve. It would become more mundane, or you just don't
it would be
sustain that
more or it
level.
would be less. To your point,
Right.
right? It
It
would
would.
be
It would be
more. It would
more or
be less.
less. The problem is, while that works so well in the beginning and it's all the chasing around and Tatiana also being, like you said, psychedelically influenced at certain points and trying to figure that whole thing out, there's a lot of the good in understated horror. I think what he's doing is just little things here and there and never completely letting the simmer turn to a boil. He wants you to just sit in the simmer. It just doesn't work towards the end. And it's just another example to me of Oz getting us so close and then fumbling in that third act.
Hmm.
And I wish that wasn't it, because I still do think Keeper to me is a little bit better than you know, I'd say two of his three earlier films. I'll let you decide which two I think, but it's still just not there. It's still not one of the positive ones. It's not Long Legs or The Monkey to me, where he is trying something and actually hitting the home run versus kind of just really kind of whiffing in that third act. That's where I think I end on it.
Yeah, I am open to any criticism of Keeper, and I think that people that have said it feels half baked. Well, it was a strike shoot, right? Like the history of Keeper is that it was a film that was shot using Canadian talent and Canadian tasks, or a Canadian talent and Canadian writer, Canadian everything, in order not in order to get around, but to ensure that the folks that were working had something that they could do during the strike. Folks that were able to work without SAG considerations. And so there is an element of an exercise piece to it. I do think it feels like something that was, for something that moves as slow as it does. It's Osgood Perkins's Dr. Horrible sing along blog, right? It is a film that was designed to capture a moment and give people something to do when they couldn't do other stuff. But I do. My last word on this is I do take a little bit of umbrage with the notion that people are like, "Oh, nothing happens or it's half baked." Like you can disagree with, and I think the truth of Osgood Perkins, first, second act, third act, whether or not the third act gets you there for what you've gone through in the first, second act, that's the Stephen King can't write an endingness of it all, right? I think there are a lot of people that'll probably agree with you on that front. But if you watch that first hour of the film and watch a character that is basically like shaking themselves to pieces while trying to put on a happy face, and it's not due to anyone else's expectations other than her own, and sort of how tense that is and how uncomfortable it is and how long we sit with her in that until shit really does start to not become her fault anymore. That's it. Like, I'm glad that they're working together. I'm glad that Osgood Perkins has a muse. I'm glad it's Tatiana Maslany. I'm glad that she's getting an opportunity to headline stuff again after a few years in sort of like the Disney trenches. I am I This was not a lock for me. This was not a film that I thought that I was going to love. And so for me to actually love it, I was very happy about, and it makes me excited to go see the young ones or the young adults, whatever his next film is going to be, because between this and Monkey, which are 2 and 3 on my list, I think that he's not somebody that just made long legs and didn't have anything else in the hopper. There are plenty of other films that he can continue to make over the next couple of years. I'm excited to see them. That's it. That's our keeper convo. As always, we encourage you to go to certifiedforgotten.com. I reviewed this one for the website, so I have a few more of my cohesive thoughts written down at certifiedforgotten.com under the reviews tab at the top of the website. Otherwise, though, Donato, if folks want to stay connected to you through these holiday seasons and to be thankful for all the horror that you're watching, and more importantly, to go see you grapple with films they don't normally associate with you, some of your screeners and your award reviews that you're going to be doing, where do they connect with you online?
Yep, you can follow me at Donatobomb, DonatoBomb, and that's Blue Sky, that is Letterbox, and that's Instagram. So, as Monagle said, we are in the thick of award season, so I am just burning through every one of my FYC screeners and posting everything from Just Watch Rental Family, Just Watch Frankenstein. We're going down the list. There is nothing that I will not consider for awards, and I try to give it the best shot I can. So, I'll just have little mini capsule reviews of all those, and you can hear my thoughts on the big contenders for this Oscar season.
I love it. You can find me on Blue Sky. It's monogold.bluesky.social. I am no longer a member of a critic body, so I don't have to watch everything, which is kind of a fucking relief, to be perfectly honest. But I have been asked to do my top horror films of 2025 for a site that shall be named later, which means I'm going back and looking at some of the Shutter releases and other stuff that I haven't seen yet. So hopefully, by the time this airs, I will have at least 2 more movies under my belt, and yeah, I'm excited to go see some of the smaller films, especially the international films that I might have missed along the way. But that's it. Thank you all for listening, and our next Osgood Perkins movie comes out, what, like 6 months? So we'll do this all again soon.